It's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. Seoul plans to have its three-pronged defense system up and running in the early 2020s, or about 5 years ahead of schedule, to protect itself from North Korea's continued provocations. Members of the UNSC who are already working on additional sanctions on North Korea for its latest nuke test released a press statement unanimously condemning its weekend missile launch. President Park Geun-hye meets with representatives from various countries who are in Seoul to learn about Korea's Saemaul Rural Development Initiative and vows to help them replicate the country's success. Following Pyongyang's latest missile test, the South Korean government and the ruling party have agreed on the necessity of bolstering the country's missile defense readiness to more effectively counter North Korean threats. Park Ji-won starts us off with Seoul's plans to expedite completion of the country's key defense systems.
The South Korean government and the ruling Saemaul party have agreed to expedite the establishment of the nation's three-pronged defense system against North Korea's nuclear threats by the early 2020s and advance from the current time frame of the mid-2020s. The three elements of the defense system are the country's indigenous air and missile defense system, or KAMD, and the kill chain preemptive strike system, and the Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation Action Plan that would target the North Korean leadership, including its military headquarters, in the event of a nuclear attack. The agreement was made at a meeting at the National Assembly on Tuesday morning, which came together after North Korea's failed ballistic missile launch last weekend. The talks were attended by Defense Minister Han Min-gu and other defense officials on the government side, and floor leader Chung Jin-seok and chief policymaker Kim Kwang-lim for the ruling party. The Saemaul party also called on the government to acquire nuclear-powered submarines to counter Pyongyang's submarine-launched ballistic missiles and bolster South Korea's defense readiness.
The government should proactively examine acquiring nuclear-powered submarines to protect the South from the North's SLBM threats. The submarines will also be a great asset in the long term to South Korea, a country with three sides facing the sea.
The Defense Ministry officials said they would cautiously examine the request. The government and the ruling party also touched on the importance of rooting out corruption in defense procurement projects.
We called on the military authority to transparently manage procurement projects. The country's defense capabilities depend on the eradication of defense procurement corruption.
The government and the ruling party also agreed to secure extra funds next year to counter the threats posed by North Korea's newly developed multiple launch rocket systems and its ever-increasing cyber warfare capabilities. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Also, South Korea is reviewing the idea of acquiring a nuclear-powered submarine to respond to North Korea's nuclear threats. But according to our Connie Kim, there are a few issues Seoul must tackle before it can greenlight the plan.
The South Korean government has agreed to review the possibility of acquiring its own nuclear-powered submarine in response to North Korea's successful launch this summer of a ballistic missile from a submarine. The agreement was made Tuesday in a meeting between the government and ruling Saemaul party. The best way to respond to the North threat would be to have a nuclear-powered submarine that could monitor North Korea's submarine base and launch a preemptive strike if necessary. Military authorities say the two main challenges would be acquiring the technology and receiving consent from neighboring countries. A nuclear-powered submarine requires uranium with enrichment levels ranging from between 20 and 90%. Seoul does not have a uranium enrichment facility, but it could acquire uranium enriched to 20% from Washington under the South Korea-U.S. Atomic Energy Agreement sealed last year. While the acquisition of uranium enriched to 90% would have to be further negotiated with Washington, military experts say South Korea would first have to decide on the level of enriched uranium it would use for its submarine.
With highly enriched uranium, there could be limitations imposed by the international community, as it could be used for nuclear weapons development. But the complication with low-enriched uranium is that fuel rods must be changed every 10 years.
However, the bigger concern is that opposition from China, Russia, and even Japan could spark an arms race in the region. Seoul is likely to consult with Washington on the matter when the defense chiefs from Seoul and Washington meet later this week. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A U.S. expert says North Korea's aggressive missile testing schedule could see its Musudan missiles enter operational service next year. Our Lee Ji-won explains why there's more to Pyongyang's failed intermediate-range ballistic missile test than meets the eye.
Aerospace engineer John Schilling says North Korea's aggressive testing schedule, which appears to include only one successful launch of its Musudan missile among 7 attempts this year, could see the missile enter operation service by next year. Writing in a report Monday for the U.S.-based North Korean monitoring website 38 North, Schilling said the regime's failed Musudan launch over the weekend is noteworthy, as it could be a sign the North is testing to see if they have really mastered something new. He said this shows that North Korea is not simply repeating old failures, but tweaking variables every time. A Korean expert says there's ample evidence that North Korea's missile development is already very successful.
I believe North Korea's ballistic missile technology has improved significantly. They've launched 23 ballistic missiles this year, with most of them failing because they shortened the range and launched the missiles at a higher angle than normal. North Korea has acquired the technology to allow an intercontinental ballistic missile to re-enter the atmosphere and explode in mid-air, which is 90% of a successful launch.
Another article on the 38 North website from Monday reported that satellite images taken earlier this month show there have been some signs of continued activity at the North Dongchangni launching station, the site of Saturday's failed missile launch. It said that a shelter used to conduct final preparations on a rocket engine before it's loaded by a crane onto the test stand is instead adjacent to the stand. When not in use, the shelter would normally be positioned further back on the concrete pad. The Korean expert says thousands of engine tests are done before a test launch of a missile, possibly indicating another missile launch is not far away. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council has come down hard on North Korea, unanimously condemning the regime for its recent attempts to test-fire a ballistic missile. This comes as the Council is currently in the process of drawing up even stronger sanctions over its recent nuclear test. Kwon So-hwa reports.
Calling it a grave violation of North Korea's international obligations under multiple UN resolutions, the 15 members of the Security Council strongly condemned the regime's failed Musudan missile launch conducted on Saturday. Following an emergency meeting in New York on Monday local time, the Council released a press statement saying it deplores all of Pyongyang's ballistic missile activities. The statement said these activities contribute to the regime's nuclear weapons delivery systems development and raise tensions. It further stressed that the Council regrets that the regime is behaving this way while the North Korean people's needs are going unmet. The Council also asked for all UN member states to redouble their efforts in the implementation of existing sanctions on North Korea. The UN Security Council is currently discussing even heavier measures on North Korea ever since its 5th nuclear test conducted last month. South Korea expressed its support for the latest condemnation, saying it is a strong message to North Korea, as well as an indication of a united will to change the regime's nuclear calculus.
The South Korean government welcomes the UN Security Council's strong condemnation of North Korea's threats and will continue its diplomatic efforts to closely cooperate with the international community on the thorough implementation of the Council's sanctions resolution.
Some of those efforts will unfold in Washington on Wednesday when South Korea's foreign and defense ministers discuss North Korea issues with their U.S. counterparts at the so-called 2+2 meeting. South Korea's foreign ministry announced Tuesday that Seoul's top diplomat Yoon Byung-se departed on Tuesday for that and other sideline meetings and will hold a joint press briefing with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry Wednesday. That's expected to highlight Seoul and Washington's strong alliance, especially when it comes to dealing with North Korea's threats. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Shifting our focus to Japan, lawmakers there have once again paid a visit to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, glorifying the country's imperialistic past. The gesture on Tuesday prompted a quick response from Korea's foreign ministry, which later in the day expressed deep concern and disappointment over the move by some 80 politicians. The Yasukuni Shrine honors Japan's war dead, including 14 Class A war criminals. Seoul urged the lawmakers to demonstrate sincere remorse for Japan's past wrongdoing to gain the trust of Japan's neighbors and the world. The visit came a day after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sent a ritual offering to that shrine. More Japanese lawmakers are reportedly slated to visit during the shrine's annual autumn festival, which runs through Thursday. Over 7,400 Saemaul leaders from 99 countries have been trained in Saemaul Undong, Korea's rural development movement so far. Today, President Park Geun-hye attended a special event that brought together practitioners of that unique movement. Song Ji-sun shares with us the president's speech for the opening of the Global Saemaul Leadership Forum in Pyeongchang.
President Park highlighted the values of diligence, self-reliance, and cooperation that are the guiding principles of the Saemaul Undong movement, which laid the groundwork for Korea's present success. She also vowed to help replicate that success around the globe by providing customized support for countries seeking to eliminate poverty and pave the way for sustainable growth.
앞으로 지구촌 새마을 운동이 더욱 발전해 나가기 위해서는 각국의 특수성과 시대 상황에 맞춰 종합적이고 지속 가능한 방향으로 계속 변화해 나가야 합니다. 앞으로 한국은 여러분들이 각국의 현실에 맞는 새마을 운동을 추진할 수 있도록 필요한 부분을 적극 지원할 것입니다.
President Park pledged to invite more participants to join the initiative and vowed to provide a standardized curriculum and textbooks to enhance their capabilities. Seoul also established a Saemaul Undong Index, which factors in a country's status, policy, and potential, so the programs can be designed to meet the needs of its people. Saying that Korea will always stand as a partner for happiness and prosperity of the world, the president also promised to implement follow-up programs so that the initiative can take root in each country. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Moving on to a different story now, a trial will begin tomorrow for members of Lotte Group's founding family on a range of corruption-related charges. Shin Dongbin, the current president of Korea's fifth largest conglomerate and the focal point of the corruption investigation, will be prosecuted without detention. His father and the patriarch of the group, Shin Gyeok-ho, as well as his estranged brother Shin Dong-ju, who is the vice chairman of Japan's Lotte Holdings, will also be prosecuted without detention on charges of tax evasion, embezzlement, and breach of trust. The probe into corruption at the highest levels of Lotte Group began back in June. On the 26th of last month, the prosecutors requested an arrest warrant for Shin Dongbin, but the court rejected the request. A new poll held over the weekend shows Hillary Clinton has a healthy 12-point lead over Donald Trump, and now the Democratic presidential nominee aims to widen the ratings gap from her Republican rival by expanding her campaign to win votes in some major battleground states across the nation. Yoon Shin has the updates from the U.S. presidential race.
Hillary Clinton's new strategy, pulling out all the stops in the so-called swing states. The new plan announced on Monday calls for the Clinton campaign to spend $6 million on direct mail as well as its digital advertising in 7 swing states across the nation. And in the hopes of winning over anti-Trump Republicans, the Democratic presidential hopeful plans to go all out in Arizona, a state that's only gone for a Democratic candidate once since 1948. First Lady Michelle Obama, a strong backer of Clinton's, is set to campaign for her on that traditionally Republican turf on Thursday, after appearances by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and Chelsea Clinton earlier in the week. As of Monday, poll results show Clinton with an advantage over Trump across the battleground states. A recent university poll shows Clinton ahead in 3 swing states, Colorado, Florida, and Pennsylvania, and tied with Trump at 45% in Ohio. Other polls by CNN of 3 critical purple states, Nevada, North Carolina, and Ohio, showed Trump leading Clinton in Ohio, 48% to 44%, while Clinton had razor-thin leads in North Carolina and Nevada. Although the Democratic nominee has a 2-digit lead in polls by Monmouth University and the Wall Street Journal NBC, political pundits note that ultimately it'll come down to the battleground states. Shin, Arirang News.
Turning our attention to the Iraqi government forces' offensive to drive the so-called Islamic State from the northern city of Mosul, Iraq's Prime Minister Hyder al-Abadi made a televised statement Monday announcing the start of the U.S.-backed mission. The ISIS-linked Amaq news agency said its fighters had launched 10 suicide attacks on advancing forces near Mosul and that Peshmerga forces had encircled 5 villages but failed to take them. According to journalists and NGOs in the area, thousands of people are trapped inside the city as IS militants had threatened to shoot any civilians trying to escape. The commander of the coalition, U.S. Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend, said the operation will likely continue for weeks or possibly longer. If Mosul is retaken, Raqqa in Syria will be the Islamic State's last remaining stronghold. Meanwhile, Russia has announced a humanitarian pause in its bombing of Aleppo. According to Moscow's defense ministry, airstrikes on the Syrian city will be halted for an 8-hour span between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Thursday local time. It's designed to give civilians and rebels time to leave and allow humanitarian aid to be delivered into the area. UN agencies welcomed the announcement but said the window should be at least 12 hours as they'll need more time to deliver aid to the besieged eastern part of Aleppo. Russia's announcement came on the day an airstrike reportedly killed at least 14 people from the same family. Since Moscow backed the Aleppo assault after the collapse of a truce brokered by Russia and the U.S., around 450 civilians have been killed, including scores of children. That concludes our newscast for this hour. If you're tuned in from Korea, stick around. More domestic news updates coming right up. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Devin Whiting with your in-depth domestic news. At today's regular cabinet meeting, the government approved an amendment to help working moms and those hoping to become mothers. The bill will entitle working women to maternal leave as well as leave for fertility treatment. Our Shin Dongbin has more on this, along with another big change coming to university-level education.
The Korean government on Tuesday reviewed and approved an amendment to a law concerning equality in employment and work-family balance. The amendment will be reviewed and voted on by the National Assembly. The revised bill will entitle women both in the public and private sectors to child care leave and leave for fertility treatment when the legislation takes effect next July 1st. Also, to help parents balance work and family, those with children under the age of 8 can take advantage of reduced working hours for up to 2 years. That would mean 15 to 30 hours per week. The Minister of Employment and Labor, Lee Ki-kwon, said the new amendment will help raise the female employment rate, improve the balance between work and family, as well as raise the nation's chronically low birth figures. Meanwhile, the government also approved an amendment to a law governing higher education, which will cut in half the required credits for Koreans attending domestic universities when they get joint or double degrees abroad. Instead of the current 2 years, just 1 year in Korea will be required for their local degree. Shin Dongbin, Arirang News.
The ongoing strike by the nation's truck drivers union is now in its second week. It's yet to have much effect on the nation's distribution network. However, there are concerns that it's not going to end soon. According to the Transport Ministry, as of yesterday morning, not a single driver out of the nearly 8,400 working for a major distributor was outright refusing to transport goods, but around 9% of them had not shown up for work, citing personal reasons. That 9% marks a jump from Sunday, by which time such passive non-participation had all but ended. The government and the truckers' union have yet to sit down for talks. The strikers are opposed to a government plan to deregulate their industry and allow more drivers. That means more competition on the roads. Hyundai Motor has laid out its strategy to win a greater market share in China, the world's biggest auto market. The Korean auto giant said today that by 2018, just 16 years after it first entered the Chinese market, it expects to have sold 10 million vehicles there. By comparison, to reach that same milestone in Korea, it took 38 years. Hyundai Chairman Chung Mong-gu, speaking at the opening ceremony for the company's new plant in China's Hubei province, said Hyundai now has a production capacity in China of 2.4 million cars a year, enough to theoretically grab about 10% of the market. Total sales of passenger vehicles in China by all car makers this year are expected to breach the 20 million mark. And those are some of the stories we're following right now. Thanks for watching. We'll be back at 8 p.m. Korea time. Bye for now.